which had immediately preceded the adoption of this policy. The town board had gone through a almost 12-month process to identify what they wanted to see in terms of development parameters across the street on the 160 acres that we refer to as the town center. As an outgrowth of that, as we were talking about what the town was prepared to do in terms of helping facilitate that development, we got into the idea of having a formalized financial incentive policy. Historically, there's really only one project in town that the town has offered financial assistance to, and that's the Superior Marketplace. For those of you that have been around a while will recall that the town came up with a fairly complicated financial arrangement, 3 different financing or borrowing mechanisms with a cumulative value of approximately $21.5 million to help stimulate the development of the Superior Marketplace. Other than that, we haven't done a lot of this. The policy that is before you had 2 triggers. The first said that we had to create a minimum of 25 new full-time or full-time equivalent positions in order to trigger financial stimulus. The other was providing significant new revenue to the town, and we defined that as $250,000 net of any expenses associated with the new development. It was about this time that the town had just approved the new Starbucks that went in at Colton Crossing. And at least at the time, it was the desire of the board that they weren't going to get into incenting those scales of development, those kinds of small projects. So with that brief introduction, Mr. Nillis and I are available to answer any questions that you might have about changes you'd like to see or how we got there. We're also armed with information about what many of our neighbors do or have done.
Lisa.
Great. That was one of the questions I was going to ask, was whether we talked to Arvada, Broomfield, others about, Louisville about that. But the other thing I wanted to say was I hope that we can revisit this after we decide if we're going to have a policy of going and meeting with all the businesses, which is a strong recommendation that I've been sort of wanting to have. So I'd like to review it in the context of what do we hear from businesses if the board decides to go on one, I guess we'll decide at our strategic retreat, but if we decide to go on one-on-one meetings with the various businesses, then I guess I'd want to relook at this and see if we bring any new information into this for both retention and for new business. So I'm happy to discuss it tonight.
Anecdotally, I had a conversation with the Chamber of Commerce this morning, and the first 2 questions are, are you going to help me with my rent? And the other one was, are you going to help me with my advertising budget? So depending on how far you want to go, people will have their hand out.
Thanks.
Chris.
2 questions. How many companies have actually participated in this? And then what was the discussion about smaller businesses? You said it was kind of ruled out, but was there discussion about maybe having another plan that could include smaller businesses?
The discussion about small businesses was the things that had recently happened within the town. The board at the time had decided that they didn't feel a need to stimulate, to open up its checkbook to help facilitate or to stimulate with financial incentives. And again, I used the example of the roughly 8,000 square foot 2 buildings of which was anchored at the time by the Starbucks. That was specifically the type of a project that the board at the time said, it's not big enough, it doesn't provide enough revenue to the town, it doesn't capture the desire of that's the kind of thing where we want to be spending our money on.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No.
Reading about Ethan Allen, this incentive policy wouldn't apply to them.
Correct.
Even though I would think that's a huge company, and you would think a company like that it would apply to, but it certainly does not.
No. And in fact, if you want to look at it, there are 5 current businesses in town that generate $250,000 a year to the town. Only 5. So if you use that as your threshold or your benchmark, there wouldn't be a lot of existing businesses that the town would have incented to get them here in the first place.
And Lisa, you have a question, but unfortunately, Ethan Allen probably doesn't provide any, minimal revenue to the town because it's all going to where the furniture is being delivered.
That's an example. I think our economic analysis showed it was somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 was going to be the town's economic return from that 19,000 square foot retail showroom.
Lisa.
And I'm just following up on my implied question about Arvada, Broomfield, et cetera. So wondered if you could answer that or provide that input.
I got some very specific information from some of them. I don't know that we typically consider Arvada a neighbor, but my observation in generalizing what many of our neighbors do, they seem to be more aggressive and more liberal with, as I say, opening up their checkbook depending on their existing financial straits. Louisville has a policy for retail. Generally, they've been offering a 40% sales tax rebate for periods ranging from 3 to 5 years. And on the office and
What's the
industrial,
threshold, the size threshold?
they don't have it.
Any size?
Right.
It seems like a case-by-case basis.
And they've been much more active when you look at the number that they've been doing, but the dollar amounts have been relatively small. On the office and industrial, they're generally been offering 50% of development fees, including building permits, and 50% of the construction use taxes. So you'll see some similarities because we've also talked about 50% of net, not giving away the whole loaf, but half of the loaf. Lafayette, much more benevolent, no formula whatsoever. We found one, the new Jacks that they're bringing in, which is I believe it's a sporting good facility. They've incented with $1 million up front, plus 50% of all new sales tax over and above what the previous tenant in that space had generated. Broomfield, again, it's across the spectrum, and again, we could find no formula. In fact, we found some where they were incenting businesses as small as, the smallest one I found was $350 that they were providing a local retailer who had provided 5 new jobs. Westminster, all geared towards job creation. I didn't find anything in their background where they were providing incentives based on sales tax generation or revenue flow.
What are their thresholds on job creation?
Again, the ones that we saw were some very large ones and very large, high six-figure contributions for job creation. I saw one at 100, one at almost 400. And Boulder's got an interesting approach. They've actually allocated a $350,000 pool to their city manager for discretionary grants, what they call flexible rebates. And there are a bunch of points. And I've seen those awarded for things as small as my company is buying a hybrid pool vehicle, and therefore that company qualifies for a grant of X, $15,000, $20,000. They are in the process of creating a micro loan program in conjunction with some of their local banks, and they're looking to have a couple $1 million in a micro loan pool that they could use to assist businesses. But it's across the board.
I'll just add what I know about Arvada, which was that Arvada went back to a lot of the, let's call them maturing or underperforming strip malls, et cetera, and went back and met with them and met with their property managers as well in order to try to say, what will it take for you to revitalize this facility? What can we do to help, sort of thing. And I think that kind of hands-on stuff may be what's required, when you're in that kind of a situation. So, anyway.
Other questions and or comments about this?
I would like Scott's gut feel, given the current economic situation, given what our neighbors do, what would you suggest as some feasible approaches?
I'm very aggressive when it comes to economic development, and as I keep you up on almost a weekly basis of all the conversations that we're having. But at the same time, I'd be cautious of, as I describe, opening the checkbook when it's not necessary. There is little that we can do when it comes to those core business decisions of location here versus location somewhere else. And at the end of the day, I don't know that it's our checkbook that would alter many of those decisions. The other is, and I started to preface it by saying, those that I'm seeing being much more aggressive, and I'll use the example of Lafayette recently, who has experienced some tremendous loss and is trying to make up for that, and in an effort to be competitive, are offering some extraordinary levels of financial contribution to get vacancies filled. We don't experience that. While we currently have 19 vacancies in our Superior marketplace, the center is still more than 96% occupied. From its high of being 98% occupied, I I don't know a real estate property manager that wouldn't kill to have a portfolio like that. Likewise, the Rock Creek Village, we had 2 vacancies. One has since gotten refilled, and maybe that's a good anecdotal one. We didn't do anything other than open arms and cooperation in terms of getting the new backfilled space, the Baskin-Robbins. I don't know that the decision would have been any different to get here. We didn't have to pay anything to get here, so should we have paid? I would subscribe to a but-for provision, but for the level of local contribution, but for the level of local investment, that decision maker is going to decide to go elsewhere. And that really is on a case-to-case, case-by-case basis. I wouldn't suggest any overarching, broad-range change in the policy. I think the policy as it's drafted is quite good. If there's any sensitivity at all, it might be that minimum threshold, the $250,000. If there's a sense, if there's a desire that there are businesses out there that are on the brink that we want to be in a position to help, you may want to lower that threshold. As I said, there are only 5 that would meet that threshold today.
Julia?
So with Baskin-Robbins, it worked out okay. What about something like the Blockbuster? Much bigger area to fill.
0, well, okay, in terms of keeping Blockbuster.
No, not that space. I'm actually more about the space rather than the name.
Oh, in terms of the prospective
Exactly.
infill? Clearly, if we had a hot prospect that we were working on to try to fill that space, recognizing it's about a 4,600 square foot space out of a 6,000 square foot building, and it's tough to find occupants that big, I'd come back and say, this is what, if the case could be made that there was a level of investment, a reasonable level of investment that the town could make in order to get a decision maker to choose that site than, say, the other side of Colton.
Right.
I'd come to the board and say, let's make this kind of an offer based on this kind of an economic pro forma, based on this kind of an economic return. But let me go back to Blockbuster and say, Blockbuster, while they were a large traffic generator, produced virtually $0 to the town. Those transactions weren't taxed.
Sandy?
I'm just a little worried about the rigidity of this plan. And so the first question goes to flexibility. Does it provide the flexibility we might need to make more flexible decisions? The second thing is on a big player like Ethan Allen, the net contribution to economic development in the area, it goes beyond their contribution to sales tax of the sales made at that property. I mean, it draws traffic in from quite a ways that then contribute to the viability of other businesses.
Spin-off transactions, no doubt about it.
So I'd like you to address that.
That was one of the motivations. There was some reluctance, both at the Planning Commission and at the town board 3 years ago when Ethan Allen came in, was, is this a big enough generator for one of the last remaining pad sites? And that was the argument, if you will, or the rationale I think that the majority came up with was, it may not generate by itself, but it brings an entirely different type of destination shopper to our shopping center. And if they're buying furniture there that's going to get taxed, and then the taxes are going to go back to where they live, that's one thing. But if they're shopping at the other stores as a result of being in the marketplace, it was worthwhile. Clearly, it's difficult to quantify what that is. It's more anecdotal or gut feeling. But again, if there's a sense, if there's anything in terms of the rigidity in this policy, it's that minimum threshold of either job creation or certain level of economic activity. That's an area that could be massaged. But the idea of giving more than half the loaf, I wouldn't suggest. And just opening it up for any new activity, I would encourage you not to go unless there was a documented ability to prove that we were competing with somebody else, that they were going to go somewhere else because of a inherent cost structure that we needed to influence or impact.
I think that's fair.
Lisa?
So, as I know other folks in the chamber know, that we hear about other businesses going, some of our businesses going to our neighboring town because they're being approached and made deals. Have those, while those sound bad, and I think they are bad, it's not a good thing, how harmful has that been to our to our sort of tax revenues, and is it worth trying to meet that head on?
A couple. We had a very small retailer in the Rock Creek Village that has relocated into Louisville. That was not one of the firms that the city of Louisville has incented. If they were recruited, if they were approached, it was by the property owners, managers, not by the city of Louisville. I've already had conversations with my peers about poaching and have received assurances they weren't being poached, and they certainly didn't get incented to move across the border. Going back to the issue of, the haves and the have-nots, I still think the glass is more than half full, and we're certainly a have. We did experience a sales tax decline last year in '09. Ours was one of the smallest in the state, 0.45%. There were only two cities statewide that had sales tax growth last year. Commerce City, and I don't know how or why theirs came, and Parker, and the only thing Parker got is they opened up a new Costco last year. So, and then we were down 0.45. You know the data so far this year that we're up 10.5 through the first 2 months. And as we found on our annual sales tax rebate to Centro, the property owner of the marketplace, their 2009 receipts at the marketplace were up 2.9% over what they were in 2008. So while the town as a whole went down 0.45, sales in the marketplace, despite the increasing vacancies, were still up year over year. So
The square footage numbers were pretty compelling.
Any other thoughts or comments? My comments is that I don't want to get too flexible. I understand where you're coming from, but flexibility sometimes can be read as being arbitrary, that, I like that retailer but not that one, and I think I don't think I necessarily want to go there. And I'm a big believer in the free market, and if a business isn't going to thrive without government assistance, it's probably not going to thrive anyway, and so I want to be very cautious about that. The things that we really need to make sure happen are job growth. That's really critical for the long-term vision of the town in terms of the commercial tax base. So I want to be a little cognizant about those issues.
If I could add something, however, to that, key to economic development is diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent something diversifies beyond what we already have, I think it is worth considering. And some of these ideas I would have in mind will never meet the $250,000 sales tax number, but would be a diversifying influence. So I'm not prepared to say how flexible. I'm not prepared to say how much we should alter these. I like Trustee Skumatz's idea about going out to businesses, having roundtables of businesses in to get their feedback as to what might make a difference in keeping them in business, or those that might be considering going elsewhere, retaining them as a superior business.
I think we should be moving away from financial incentives and looking more at other incentives or promotions to help some of the small businesses, whether it's we help promote them in some way or another, or obviously I like Skumatz's idea as well, visiting them and discussing what would help them. But I think we should get away from the financial incentives. I agree with the mayor. It's a free market. They should be able to stand on their own without government assistance. So I'd like to see if there's something that staff could come up with that would be another kind of incentive, whether it was promoting somehow.
I wouldn't call it an incentive, but we talked about this for the
Correct.
last 3 years with Shop Superior campaign.
Right.
And when we first proposed it back in the spring of 2007, the board was concerned about not wanting to put barriers up and get into a war with neighboring communities about, no, don't shop there, shop here. So we were instructed specifically, don't do it. Within 6 months, almost every one of our neighbors had done it themselves.
And we've noted that.
And so we've changed.
Yes.
And we've done the,
And that's one idea.
That's-
Maybe another idea is somehow we promote business a month. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas.
What was that?
Business
A
of the month.
business a month, you
A
know,
business a month.
where you're just kind of giving them a
just
little bit of a boost.
reminding those that live here
What's
what commerce resides here as well.
So that's kind of the direction I was thinking. When I looked at this, I was a little taken aback that we were looking at financial incentives. I mean, I see that as not what government should be doing with businesses. That's my opinion, probably.
Yeah, I think we actually have to look at both. Better marketing and maybe a case-by-case scenario, look at financial incentive, because that's the reality of the market out there. We're not the only town that's doing that, so we don't want to say we'll never give any money unless they meet certain criteria. But I think there's a balance of both. So.
Lisa?
I'm glad we have a policy, and I'm interested in looking at the thresholds, and I'm not crazy about these open-ended funds. That makes me uncomfortable, so I'm happy to look at the thresholds and that sort of thing. I would like to hear from the businesses and I don't know that will change our policies necessarily, but I think it's really important to hear what the businesses have to say as well. And so even just by that itself, I think that's really important. It sounds like they're like the whole economy, they're sort of hanging on, and I'm not sure that we can push them over the ledge or in a good way. But I think it's really important to hear what they have to say, just in case there is something that they have that they suggest that we can do.
And something new that, as a result of the current inventory, so some of the comments made tonight have gotten me thinking about, there might be a structured, focused, what are we prepared to do to get the blockbuster space refilled? That doesn't have to become an all-encompassing town-wide policy, but to say, we're focused on getting that significant vacancy, high visibility, high profile, and it happens to be the largest vacancy in town, filled. We might be prepared or interested in doing something different there than we would anywhere else in town.
And we can look at something for a fairly short time that's different than what might happen in the longer run. So for a
Exactly.
short-time recession, we might say, not a teen center, but I mean, it might be something different than it might be in the longer run.
Chris?
Scott, I think that you hit it right there, is if you focus on one entity at a time, that one by itself is not going to make that big of a difference. But what do we have, 22 vacancies?
19 in the marketplace as of last Tuesday.
Okay, so if we were able to fill 15 of those vacancies, focusing one at a time, and they each employ 5 people, that's 75 employees. They turn around and shop at all the other locations, and I think that we've got a good system going there. So I would focus one thing at a time, and I agree, and I think that's the plan that we're working on.
Elio?
Just one last comment. I also think that, Sandy, you brought up a good point in terms of diversifying the kinds of business that we have here, where we can attract the surrounding communities. This only exists in Superior. People that would not normally come to Superior with the existing businesses would come because we have something unique. Those are hard to find, but I mean, we have a town board retreat next week. I think we can throw out some ideas and see what we can come up with.
I smirk because IKEA, Trader Joe's.
Well, Trader Joe's would be my ideal.
You've done surveys.
Yeah.
We've done multiple surveys,
Yeah,
and so we
Trader
still
Joe's
have
would be
that data
ideal.
about what people think is missing. So.
Right.
And I think
big IKEA is.
It would take,
other
it would
way
take the
is-
entire, it would take the entire remaining property in town, probably.
Trader Joe's.
IKEA.
IKEA is a great store, actually. That's
They
coming
are.
from California. Both of those stores are awesome.
So-
The other thing is that having an event like Memorial Day and the bicycle race and that whole, having events like that here in Superior would really bring people from, not even from Boulder County, but from areas throughout Colorado, and maybe even if it grows enough nationally, is another way to expose them to our businesses and what we have here. So events throughout the year.
And I think that that's what the government's job is, to basically provide fertile ground for businesses to grow, to bring people into there and make sure that they have the infrastructure in place that businesses can thrive. just anecdotally, I hear through the grapevine that Louisville offered a restaurant over in Louisville, some of this rebate. They're going to move there anyway. So basically what's happening, Louisville's giving them money back and they didn't need to do that anyway. So we have to be pretty cognizant about what we're doing. So, but next steps, we'll talk about it at the retreat.
At the retreat?
Coming up.
Very good.
Okay, next. Welcome to the Historical Committee. Mr. Randall, you want to start off?
Again, going back to the recent strategic planning session, in an effort to, one of the other outgrowths of enhanced communication was the board said it wanted to meet with each of its advisory boards and commissions at least annually. So what we've done is set aside during one of the board's 2 workshop sessions every month for the next 5 months, inviting each of the 5 advisory boards to come before the board and just have an open flowing discussion. So we've set aside 30 minutes, and we've scheduled them based alphabetically. So we're starting with one of our favorites, which is the Historical Commission. You've got a copy of their work program for 2010, and we have representatives here from the commission tonight that I think have some comments that they'd like to make to the board, and I look forward to a good dialogue.
Great, thanks. Anybody want to, I don't know if you want to, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, it's just since it's televised so people can hear.
All right.
Welcome, thanks for coming, and you are one of our favorite committees. We like them all, but you do exciting things.
Well, good. Thank you very much. We got 3 of us here from the commission and 1 volunteer with the commission. So I'm Larry Dorsey, the chair of the Historical Commission. I'll have the other folks introduce themselves, and then what I planned on doing, based on my orientation, was to tell you about what's been going on, what we see, some things coming down the road, and then leave it open for questions.
Great, thanks.
Hi, my name's Mary Cartwright. I've been involved for almost 3 years now.
Great.
Good evening. My name is David Cartwright. I've been involved for 3 years.
Great.
It's a pair.
I'm Gail Larson Casana. I've been involved a couple months, actually, so I'm a volunteer.
Great, thank you.
So they can help me out with any tough questions if we get any, and might start off by reviewing last Thursday night. We had the spring program, and a number of you were present at that program when we had the Molly Brown presentation, which we had 50 people here in the boardroom, and so we had a very good turnout and nice presentation. Museums have been open formally as a museum now since February, and that first day we were open in February, the first Saturday, we had 125 or so people come through that on the kind of the grand opening. On the 2 open days since then, the results haven't been quite as good. I don't think we'll have trouble getting 125 in there again, I think, but we've had moderately good turnouts. And get a lot of youngsters, too. A lot of the kids are coming by who live in the neighborhood come by and what's this place all about? And they're asking us questions and so forth. So we're busy cataloging all of the items that have been donated to the museum, and our donations have risen sharply since we've completed the Mein Kampf house. And so we continue to bring things into down to the basement and go through the process of getting them cataloged and inventoried. We're involved with an organization called ANFRAM, excuse me, which is the Association of Northern Front Range Museums, and we go to regular meetings and gone to some workshops with that organization as well. And we're looking to sometime probably in 2011 to host an ANFRAM monthly meeting, or bi-monthly meeting here. It's been a very helpful organization. The town of Superior owns a fire truck, the old fire truck that was from the old volunteer fire department, and we've been looking at that, what would it take to restore that to an operational level and have a good-looking paint job on it so it could be brought out during 4th of July parades and that sort of thing. And so we've had a number of people look at the fire truck who are in the area of auto restoration, and retired fireman from Longmont gave it a good look and got pretty excited about it. So this is apparently it was built in it was built in 1942, apparently as a military vehicle, military fire truck back then, and then it went to Lafayette, the city of Lafayette, and then to Superior. So we're trying to figure out a way to secure grants. And so at some point, we'd like to make a budget proposal, either in 2011 or 2012, to do some sort of restoration on that fire truck. We're looking at a walking tour in the fall, a walking tour through the historic spots of original Superior. And we're looking at it now because we have to get it into the Parks and Recreation Bulletin. Have to have it ready in time to put into the bulletin for publication. And that would be in conjunction, probably be in October, in conjunction with the museum being open that day, and then have a couple of the old-timers lead people through Grasso Park and over to the old mine camp site, the mine site. We had a suggestion from David recently that Ted Asti attends all of our meetings and gets in his car and drives all the way over from his house to this place or to the mine camp house for the meetings. And we're considering proposing that Ted be made an honorary commissioner on the Superior Historical Commission. So that's something that's in the works. Been asked to speak about any possible building acquisition that might come down the road someday. Over the years, we've had a lot of discussion with Danny Kuffner about the garage that's on his property. That was one of the school buildings in the past, back in the old days. And we've talked with him about the possibility of his donating it to the town and then have the town move it on to the Asti Park site and undergo some sort of restoration of that building, too. It was also at one time called the community building, and so it is something that could be used as a community meeting place, as well as some other historical aspects as a school building. And let's see. We will have a presence at the Morgul Bismarck and at the 4th of July and at the Chili Parade, 4th of July Parade and the Chili Fest, as we usually do with our tent and artifacts, both historic artifacts and living artifacts, who are there to talk about Superior's past. And I guess we could open up for questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Lisa.
Please.
One of the reasons I've asked you to talk about the buildings was because of the issue about after the fact, it was brought to my attention, or it may have been brought to my attention before the fact, but it only caught my attention after the fact, of things like a post office being torn down, stuff like that. And so I wanted to find out from you guys, you guys and gals, whether there were other buildings that we should know are something other than what they appear to be right now, that we should kind of have our eyes on as potential future acquisitions. That's where I was coming from on that. I knew the Kuffner property was one also that was the Kuffner building was also one of great interest. But if there are others as well, that's one of the things I thought you guys might be aware of and could give us a little heads up on.
Mm-hmm. And I think most all the other buildings that I'm aware of are residences, not any form of businesses, or like the post office, the house that was also the post office at one time. So that's the only.
They were all the rest of them were always residences, and as far as you know, pretty much. Okay. I'm sorry, I just wanted a heads up on that.
It's okay. I'm just,
and it's not something you have to tell us,
Some other experts here that could
everything
speak
now,
that word.
And there is an inventory of that, right? I
Yes.
remember that we did that, 5 or 6 years ago.
That's right.
Inventoried the houses, so.
Yes.
Deborah.
The historic school building that's on the Dan Kuffner's property,
Yes.
that is the original one that's in the pictures?
Yeah. There were two of them, and one of them was destroyed, and the other one, Danny moved to the site and made it into a garage, yes. So,
Wow.
it is
So
one-
those are in those pictures
Yeah.
that you have up in the
Yes, they are.
museum? Oh, nice.
Yep.
Nice. I love what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you.
I think I heard also through the grapevine, and it might be the wrong building, but I periodically talk to original town residents, that one of those buildings, and I think it's that one, is where they held community dances. And I might be wrong, but I think that that's the one.
Yeah.
It's certainly of interest.
Yeah, it had that other name of the community building, so they had those community functions in there too, yes.
Great.
Right you are.
Let's see, 2 questions. Let's see, you talked about the fire truck, and it's, I don't remember where it's housed right now. Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's in a storage unit over on County Line Road, with the Erie mailing address, but just northeast of Lafayette a little bit.
And I was envisioning where that could go in town. I can't really see where that would be, so I assume that it would continue to be warehoused someplace else, even if it was refurbished.
Well, in the when the construction project that should take place at the firehouse on Colton Road is finished, we're thinking it should free up the space in the building here, the Parks and Recreation Building, I think it's called, with the former site where it's housed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we had a discussion, and maybe Sandy, you want to talk about it. We have been, and you gave us a recommendation about what to do with the. It's not a fire extinguisher, a fire fire
The
pumper.
pumper,
is that what it's called?
yes.
And would you mind going over that? And then I think Sandy has some questions.
Yeah, well, it was, we were asked to consider the fire pumper, which is located in the entryway out there. I think there were about 3 other sites that were suggested where it could be placed, and as the commission looked at all the options, we thought it was doing just fine where it is.
Okay. And then there was.
And so there was a motion, and it was approved in the commission meeting to leave it in that spot.
Well, I'll pass the mic to you.
The recommendation on that, Larry, is to set it upright. Apparently, the proper position for the fire pump is upright, not on its side. And to brace the wheels, to leave it where you said, stand it upright, brace the wheels so kids couldn't actually cause it to roll out the glass.
Yeah.
And whatever the proper position on the handle is, whether it's braced up or braced in the folding position, again, so kids can't play with it. And for you, actually, your organization, to write a historical plaque on it that puts it in the context of the town's history, so that anybody entering can actually understand the historical nature of it. And then a third potential part of that recommendation is, if historical photos are available, to actually frame those historical photos of it in use, maybe 3 or so that somebody seeing it, reading the plaque, can put it in its proper historical context. So the question, I guess, would be,
Does that sound reasonable,
is-
and if that's something
yeah.
you can do?
Well, I think it sounds reasonable. We could surely do the description, all that sort of thing. I don't know of any photographs or anything like that that might exist of that back in the day or in use or anything like that, but we could sure give it a shot.
I think there are some residents in attendance who've brought some to share with you. And, but if it certainly seems to fall within the Historical Commission's charter,
Yes,
and
indeed.
in essence, we'd have a little bit of the museum right here in our entryway.
So I think we'd be glad to do that.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
questions or concerns, comments?
Just minor comment, I intended to be at the Molly Brown show Thursday night, but got stuck in the air circling Denver in this nasty weather.
Oh, is
we
that
had.
so? Yeah.
I think I got home about an hour after you all were home.
And I was sitting at the airport while you were stuck in the air.
Me too, actually, yeah.
At least we weren't volcano-related or something like that, I guess.
Well, I'd be in France if it were volcano.
That's right.
That would be better.
Well, I understand. Sorry you missed it. It was a
No, I was looking forward
good
to that.
program.
So,
We
then-
excuse me.
No, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, we have tried to do 2 of those every year, and last year we only did 1, so it's kind of a
great, too.
resource allocation problem, but we may have something coming up again.
So, just along those lines, we need to make sure that we always, publicize this either in the newsletter and on the CAC. I think that we do that, but, we just
Yeah.
remind ourselves to do that, and as well as the probably a week before the Saturday opening, also to publicize that, to make sure that people are aware of that. And then my only other question had to do with, do school programs, are the schools interested in coming by the museum? Have they expressed any interest about being there?
Well, not for a while. We we have had some requests in the past to speak to, I think it's fourth grade classes now that are doing Colorado history. One of our goals is to do a better job of coordination with the local elementary schools and have the building open for tours of classes that are studying Colorado history at the time. So that is definitely a goal.
Okay.
We aren't doing it right now.
Great. Well, we don't want to give you it's a volunteer organization. We don't want to throw too much on your plate, but I think that would be living history is always very interesting, and if you can actually go and touch something and see what was happening there. So
we've had a number of Cub Scout presentations too, so it's that's worked out pretty nicely. Except for the first one, we had a little trouble getting the door unlocked. We had to improvise, but we got that bug worked out. So.
Great.
I'm looking forward to your October presentation, your October 1.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good
Thanks.
deal.
Anything else? All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work. All right. Agenda items. I don't think we've actually got to the agenda items in a long time during a work session. So
We had
see how it goes.
Not necessarily in the order that they're presented here, but we do anticipate bringing closure to various appointments, both internal and external appointments of the board, and at a minimum, would hope to have a recommendation for you at the next meeting on both the judge and associate judge, both of whom have expressed interest in being reappointed. We are scheduled to receive the 2009 audit report, and the auditors will be in attendance to explain the incredibly boring 100-page financial document.
It's not boring.
We do have two action items anticipated after the Planning Commission meets next Tuesday, but we do anticipate that we will have both a site development plan and a lease agreement for the proposed clear wire wireless communication antenna that has been discussed in Community Park. But again, two separate action items. One would be the actual siting of the antenna, and the other would be the lease agreement under which the town would serve as its host landlord. I'm putting as a placeholder in the hopes that we will have our negotiations completed on the solar field power purchase agreements. We're getting very close. And two other items that were on my list, though not on Phyllis's, we are currently soliciting bids for fiscal year 2010 and beyond street sweeping. And I would hope to have those available for the next board meeting in time for the spring sweep this year. And we're also working with Boulder County Parks and Open Space regarding some Excel power poles that traverse the Verhey property. They're relocating or upgrading the power poles from Louisville all the way to Jeffco. None of the poles on our open space are going to be changed or affected. However, because they're going, some of the poles are going to be taller, they need a wider easement because of what they refer to as the line swing. So we'll have a modest easement agreement between us and Boulder County and Excel regarding the existing poles that bisect the Verhey property. For the workshop session, we had talked about having Mr. Zylas, our water attorney, at the next meeting. We found that he cannot be in attendance, so we're scheduling him for the second meeting in May or the first meeting in June. You do have a presentation by ProStack and Parks Rec and Open Space on Community Park East, particularly the final designs that you've seen when you saw, I believe, 2 months ago, which included the separation of any encroachment within closer proximity to the creek. We wanted to push everything away from to at least 50 feet away from the creek bed, and I believe there were going to be some other alternatives, possibly about parking configuration. But instead of having the water discussion, Water 101 that night, the possibility that we will be bringing in Tier 3 streets, and the board had asked that they wanted to review, hopefully by the end of April, we will be having no more snow or snow plowing, how the Tier 3 street worked this year with our third-party contractor. So miles, cost per mile, what the enhanced services that we were able to provide this year, and what it cost us.
Lisa?
is any kind of presentation or update due about what's happening with Boulder Valley Ice? Any updates on that?
Don't have any updates. I've talked to their board members and their attorney probably once a week. They're working on their financing. My suggestion to them was, once they knew which direction they wanted to go, whether it was town financing or their own conventional financing, I didn't want to do a development agreement that referenced one if they hadn't made up their mind. Once they know where their financing is coming from and the amount of their financing, I think we'll be able to get the rest of the terms. You've seen the agreement. I've had no question or pushback from them on any of those elements, from the donation of the existing building, the community meeting space. All of the things that we talked about before are still in the agreement as soon as I get any feedback on any of those items, but there have been none as of this point.
What's the likely timetable?
Again,
Window?
certainly yet this year, I would hope within 6 months.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Joe?
I was wondering if it would be possible to add a work session item for the next meeting that could give us an update on status of Morgul Bismarck and what, if anything, is needed from us, either in terms of voluntary effort or anything specifically from the board or the town, how things stand. I know as of May 10th, they don't need to be doing a dog and pony show for us, but just an update and perhaps an idea of what we could do for them, if anything.
By all means, especially with Juanita being here for Community Park East discussions, I'll have her be prepared a short period of time. I don't want to detract from the Tier 3, but by all means, we can add that.
Sandy?
I would like to raise the issue of how we intend to broadly notify our residents of the public hearing and the Planning Commission's discussion of the Clearwire side issue, and I assume the subsequent public hearing here at the town board that follows that. I don't believe residents are aware that that is potentially going in Community Park. So how do we intend to inform the public of that discussion and allow them to participate? And likewise, there is a great deal of public interest in what's going on with 3 parks. And I think we have the same notification issue with that. So certainly I have ideas on that, but I would like broad notification to our residents on both those issues.
The policies or the practices are in place in terms of something extraordinary. I'm guessing we're not talking about the emergency broadcast sirens. What is it that somebody would like to see?
Well, the deadline for the newsletter, I understand, is the 28th. Couldn't we have something in the newsletter, or do we already?
No, it hasn't gone out.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Couldn't it?
I'm asking what
Couldn't a notice go in the newsletter about it?
that the planning commission is going
28th.
that the planning commission is meeting on May 4th. Certainly, we could.
That would be great. That would be one idea.
Possibly, might I add to that?
Please, I'm just
an explanatory paragraph of what is happening, what it will look like, where it will be positioned, and I believe one of the issues is going to be the electrical field in any sort of magnetic rays or whatever that might be emitted from it, and whether or not that is an issue to be worried about. I've heard that discussed, so if that is not an issue, I think you could put that to rest in your little paragraph.
I can help put it to rest right now if you like. We're not legally allowed to consider the effects of radio frequency emissions when considering one of these applications. The federal government has told us that they're safe, and we have to take their word for it, and that's it.
Well,
and that's what you can say in the newsletter.
Exactly, and we can say
absolutely.
So.
Right. An idea on the homepage of the website, of the town website, we have a square that allows people to sign up to be emailed notices of meetings, et cetera. How many people have signed up for that? And can we send this notification to that group? can we send just a separate email to anybody who signed up for the email newsletter? Just rather than necessarily, well, I suggest putting it in the newsletter, but we also have that email list available to us to send separate emails of issues being addressed at town meetings, and I would suggest we consider that as a possibility as well.
So I think that we do that already. We publicize all the town agendas, actually, on that list.
To that list?
I get them, and I know I just got it through the general public.
We do send out all of our meeting agendas, at least the Planning Commission and the Town Board. But first, the existing policy practice is that all property owners within 500 feet of any public hearing site receive direct mail notification. I'm sensing that that's not enough. So the idea of including something in the upcoming newsletter, easy to accomplish. We have the access to do e-blast. Now, we can do that without a problem. I'm asking for what it is you want rather than just we want more.
I try to be specific about the newsletter.
You are.
And I think the newsletter is enough because the newsletter and the agenda, you can bring people to water, you can't make them drink. It's like I think that could potentially be enough. I'm leery of us. Every meeting we're going to have, we send out a special email about it. That would concern me, and I don't know where to draw the line other than to say, gosh, I think this is something of general interest. I think the fact that I don't live 500 feet from Community Park, I still will care what goes in Community Park or that sort of thing. So I think that's sort of a broad interest. I think anything in open space, broad interest, that nobody lives right next to there. We all care about it. To me, probably the newsletter and the agenda are probably enough for me. That may not satisfy Sandy, but anyway, Trustee Pennington.
I do have about 25 years in the communications field, and the data suggest that one of the drawbacks of emailed newsletters is a substantial drop in readership on a timely basis of those newsletters. It just takes too much work for people to get to them in a timely fashion. So to the extent that on particular issues that we already know that the Three Parks issue is of a lot of interest to a lot of residents. So I think that's a no-brainer. I suspect from talking to people in the community, they would really appreciate being aware of the Clearwire project. I don't know how many will choose to come to any meetings, but again, I believe it's our job as trustees to notify, and we already have those mechanisms in place. So I do not suggest embedding that in the town newsletter. Well, I suggest doing that, but in addition, broadcasting it to the extent we can.
Lisa and Chris, sorry.
And that's of interest to me, what you mentioned about the newsletter, because the questions I asked when we went to an electronic newsletter was, what happens to readership? And I was told nobody knows. So if you have data on that, I would be very interested. I was very against going to an electronic newsletter without data on what happens to readership, but I was overruled.
Right.
Chris?
In addition to the homes that are within 500 feet of the park where the Clearwire tower is going to go in, is it possible that we go directly to the people that it will affect the most, and those are the people that go to the park? So we could put signs up in the park that say this is going in on this date, or there's going to be a meeting on this date, and maybe even have a kiosk or something there that people can ask questions.
I think
Certainly, we can do anything you want. I need the resources to do it.
Public hearings.
You have a process.
The attorney is leaning towards the mic again.
You do have a process, and I just described what the process was. How your agendas for all of your public meetings get disseminated through various means: electronic, television, direct mail to those that have subscribed to it. So for somebody, now, if somebody doesn't know that something's happening in close proximity to them, maybe they haven't subscribed. But the avenues that we've taken to provide that notification, that's what exists. If you want those policies and practices changed, that's all well and good. Or if you want it to be piecemeal, pick the ones that we think somebody might be interested about, and let's go over and above on those. We've asked for that kind of guidance before and haven't gotten the best feedback. So we can do whatever you want. But if you want me to go staff somebody in Community Park, I can do that. But recognize that that's going to be, that's going to come with a cost.
The attorney is leaning towards the mark, and then Joe.
Just real quick on that, we can certainly have information available, as in documents that have been submitted as part of the application, but any questions and comments should legally occur during the public hearing on the application. So while there's no legal issue with staffing a booth full of information, having someone answer questions could be problematic. So that's what I would not recommend, but the rest of it is all fine.
Joe?
Number one, in to tie in with what Sandy has brought up, and it's been something I've brought up in the past, I think one of our major communication problems has been when we are taking a public action that doesn't really have a spelled out hearing process, and like when we take applications from people that want to, start build something or start a development, we have a laid out process. So we have a little bit of an issue of communication about when we're taking public action, like something on the park or something like that, and the process, and when is the decision really made, and that's keeps coming up. That's number one, so this ties in with that. Number two, in conjunction with our discussion tonight, I'm a little reluctant to just freewheel how we want to give public notice on this particular upcoming thing or the next one, and then we follow up with something that doesn't get the same level of notice, and the pick and choose kind of thing of what's important or not. And I think rather than, because they're hearing good ideas, but I think maybe we should consider this as a work session subject, so that we do come up with, number one, policy, or at least some kind of regular notice process that maybe expands what we're doing now, but is going to be consistent for everything we do, so that we're not going to have issues about, well, you did this notice for that project, why didn't you tell us about this one, kind of thing. That's just a concern I have. It may not be a real concern, but it's just something I'm a little worried about while we're brainstorming here, and I'm not sure tonight in a brainstorming session is the best way to decide.
So I just have one quick comment, which is that for any public hearing, we're going to be posting a sign so there will be one at the park, because we have to post it because it's a public hearing, so hopefully that will, have information on where to find information about it, so. Elia?
I know it's 7 o'clock and we have to move on, but I totally agree with you, Joe. Uniformity, I think, clearly stated is the way to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, who determines what's the criteria for one versus the other? So
Either that, or you determine guidelines, very strict guidelines on what they are, and you post that along with every time you post an e-blast or whatever it is.
I am hoping that at the May 3rd retreat, we can discuss this issue more thoroughly. I am totally with you, Joe. I do believe that there has to be a written, formal process that issues go through, and that the public's got to understand that process, and that we've got to abide by that process on issues big, medium, and small. So I'm totally with you. However, since that cannot happen between now and the next meeting, and we do have these two things that I think residents deserve to be notified of, that's why they're on the table right now.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up this discussion during the regular meeting. So it sounds like we'll have a couple more, and you can talk about it during the reports and questions. So with that, let's take 60 seconds or a couple of minutes to take a break, and then we'll hold the regular meeting. Two just,
go into
yeah, two
the-
just, yeah.
Should I have to pull item number?
Is everybody here? Looks like they are.
D.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees and the Liquor Licensing Authority for April 26, 2010. And Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Muckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ely Gregores,
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here,
Chris Hansen,
Here.
Sandy Pennington,
Here.
Lisa Stumatz,
Here.
Deborah Williams,
Here.
Town Manager Scott Reynolds,
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry,
Here.
Town Clerk Phil Sargent here.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Yeah.
Trustee Sorelli.
I'd like to, on the consent agenda, ask that item 6E be discussed.
Okay, so 6C to follow the consent agenda. Trustee Williams?
I'd like to pull D.
Okay, D to follow the consent agenda. Trustee Pennington?
I'd like to pull C.
Okay.
I'm tempted to pull A and B.
Call it a home run. All right, any other changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion by Trustee Skumatz, a second by Trustee Gregores. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. Ms. Pennington, Trustee Pennington, would you like to start?
This is my first report. So I'll tell you, I attended Arbor Day, and my compliments to Juanita and her staff for a great Arbor Day. We had lots of kids planting lots of trees. I've passed on a potential recommendation that I'd sort of like to make formal, is that we invest or have donated maybe a dozen junior-sized shovels to see all those kids wielding those big shovels. I was sure we were going to need you to do a few stitches at that thing. They were pretty wild. So if there is such a thing as a junior-sized shovel, possibly look into that for next year.
Home Depot has some, smaller size.
Great, maybe they'll donate. I attended Molly Brown last Thursday and learned a lot and thought that was just a great historical event. And there were a lot of kids there, too, as well. And then I also attended last Wednesday's ProStack meeting in which they are trying to determine the process to update their 5-year plan. And they had an aggressive agenda, I must say, at that meeting, and I found it very interesting. One question I had as a result of that meeting is I noticed that we have on our agenda tonight $95,000 or $98,000 planting of annuals contract, and it was stated at that meeting that $300,000 worth of trail work is on the agenda for 2010, and I guess I needed a little education as to whether or not that comes before the board at some point, or if that doesn't come before the board at some point.
Anything that the town is spending money on is going to be coming before the board. So,
Okay,
In excess of $25,000.
okay. That's all.
Trustee Gregores?
Oh, I just want to maybe discuss real briefly the May 24th potential meeting. I understand you and Matt are going to be out of town. Mayor, you're going to be out of town, too. So there's not a whole lot on the agenda, so what do we want to do? Do we want to move it to the 17th when everybody's here, or?
It's at the pleasure of the board. So just to be clear, so we're part of the town's economic development plan is that we're going to the International Convention Council of Shopping Centers. I forget what the ICSC, that we meet with our local major retailers and make sure that their things are going okay and anything that we need to do, and then shop for prospects to fill empty space. So I don't know, Mr. Randall, you want to add to that? But
I laid out 3 alternatives. One is to conduct the meeting as originally scheduled, recognizing that there are also 5 Mondays in the month of May. To meet the second and third Monday, move it up to the 17th, or to cancel the meeting. But however the board wishes to proceed.
Do we have enough items on the 17th if we met on the 10th?
As I said right now, and it wasn't necessarily by design, but we don't have any action items scheduled for the 24th. Not to say that there won't be something. There won't be something that comes up between now and then.
The 31st is Memorial Day, so it
Exactly.
doesn't count.
And it follows, it's Boulder, it follows the 3-day Superior Morgul.
So, why, go ahead.
So I was thinking about maybe the same thing. Could we discuss maybe we have a shorter meeting and discuss the upcoming big events for our town?
The Morgul.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we plan to post a meeting for the 17th, and then, if nothing comes up, then we can always cancel it. So, that sounds fair to people. Okay. Anything else? Trustee Williams?
Yes, I have a couple of things. I wanted to find out if we could revisit the quarterly contingent funds that we had offered for organizations supporting our town, giving them assistance for some of their valuable programs. Is that something the board is interested in doing?
I think it's a good discussion, and perhaps we should just talk about it during the board retreat.
Okay. And then I think it would be a goodwill gesture on our part to kind of celebrate and have a joint board meeting with Louisville to start off our library services with Louisville. And it was, they were, I assume, also interested in it, since I read it in your weekly report. So is any other board members interested in that?
Trustee Skumas?
I thought the suggestion about seeing if we could get a little traction on the interchange was an interesting one.
My concern of having the single source meeting, you exchange pleasantries, and after 10 minutes, you're staring at each other.
Yeah, clearly you want to have an agenda. That's what we usually do when we have those meetings, so it sounds like the interchange might be one, and talk about the library and adding more members to the library commission, so.
But that was just my suggestion, however the board wants. And I had a follow-up call today from Louisville asking what our thoughts were about a joint meeting of the two boards.
And we could do all of the above.
Yeah, I don't see
Meeting.
any downside to that. Why don't we see if we can find a date that works? I mean, this is always, we have a hard enough time getting everybody to the board and then trying to coordinate with them, and they don't have meetings on Mondays, they have them on Tuesdays, so, but yeah, I think we should try to coordinate something. It's been at least a few years.
Okay, and then also I went to an OSAC meeting, Open Space Advisory Committee, and there's not much to report other than we're just continuing, they are continuing following the 2010 work plan, and they reviewed the open space trails 5-year plan and made some minor changes and stuff. And then I also attended a DRCOG meeting last Wednesday, and several action items were passed unanimously. Among those that were significant is the US 36 corridor project. DRCOG allowed a commitment in principle for $25 million in total funds for the US corridor project. This project creates an HOT lane that's a high occupancy lane, kind of managed lanes. One buffered HOT lane would operate in each direction on Highway 36, starting at Westminster, going to Denver, or I'm sorry, Boulder, the other way, and so going each way. Similar to the one that you can take from Denver to 36, at the beginning of 36. Let's see here. This project was in conjunction with the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition, which includes Boulder, Boulder County, Superior, Louisville, Broomfield, and Westminster, who all support this 36 corridor project. And so this would basically give this project a chance to complete its funding through other secured funds as well as pending funds, and pursuing a federal loan program called a TIFA loan. And then with the remainder, there's a $40 million in DRCOG funds that can be issued for projects. And with a remainder of $15 million left after they issued the $25 million for the 36 corridor project, it was also a unanimous vote to issue a call for projects ready for add by March 31st, 2011. as a higher priority, and then with a final date of 9/30/11. So the submittal of a TIP project would be May 12th, 2010, with board approval by June or July. These would be quick implementation or ready projects that would include already designed, right-of-way acquired or near, and bids, matching funds, and quick implementation by the end of 2011. So based on that, I was wondering if we had any projects that would possibly qualify for that.
The most significant is the northeast loop of the interchange, but it's already in the approved TIP.
It was already...
It's already in the TIP, and it's already got its allocation.
Okay.
The only other thing
We
that...
could resubmit. No.
Well,
Well,
we potentially have $1 million from it. Louisville's been trying to give the money back, but hopefully that will hasn't gone there yet.
Right. The existing DRCOG's Transportation Improvement Plan, TIP, currently has, I believe it's $4.8 million devoted to the Louisville Superior Phase 2 McCaslin Interchange project, which Louisville has been trying to give back, and we're saying, hold off, let's see if we can get the band back together and come to an agreement on the design. The only other thing that the town has talked about regarding that would be eligible for a TIP project would be improvements at McCaslin and 128. And we don't have any design. It's on your 5-year CIP.
okay.
Is that our responsibility?
No, I mean, it's...
We have one leg, 1/3. Two of the legs are going to be CDOT, and one leg is going to be ours.
So they might ask us for money, but it's really should be really a state project. So. Is that it?
That's it.
So I'll just go in order. So it was really great to hear that DRCOG allocated the money, and it was good that I think what helped us was that the plan had been through the environmental impact statement and that it was ready to go. There was a pretty good design already in place for that. So it was great to hear that. Still working with RTD about trying to get $30 million. They initially said that they had $30 million, and now they're balking at that. It has to do with the revenue projections and the money they're going to spend on the east and gold lines. I don't remember exactly where that money is going. So, but hopefully they'll pony up what they said they would, and CDOT is, I think, guaranteed that they'll have $30 million for us as well, us being the 36 corridor. The TIFIA loan is problematic at the moment. That would have to do with the managed lanes where the extension of the tolling lanes where it ends at Pecos, and in the managed portions, they're hoping that the revenue derived from that would be enough to pay back the loan. They're doing some revenue modeling right now, but it doesn't look hopeful at the moment. But and then the other thing I had, I gave everybody the external committee appointments. I think that reflects everybody's input. So let me know if that looks favorable to you, and then we'll need to, I think, for DRCOG and maybe Rocky Flats, we need to do something official. The other ones, I think, are a little less official. But for these two, I think we need to have formal resolutions to say that we appointed you so that you have voting powers. So I think that's on the upcoming agenda. And then we had a work session earlier, and I think, Scott, you'll finish your reports about the weekly digest. And my only thinking about the 3 parts is that might take more time. That might be either a full work session, or we might need to move that into a regular meeting so we have enough public comment, because we don't want to run through that too fast and then realize that we're running over time or we don't have enough time for public comment. So it's something that I would like to you to look at if you could.
Okay.
Trustee Skumatz.
Let's see. I went to the Arbor Day celebration and the Historic Committee meeting, and thanks very much. The Historic Committee did a great job on the Molly Brown presentation. most of what we thought about Molly Brown was false, so that was pretty interesting to hear about. And we put a note in the CAC and encouraged kids to come, and that was very successful. A lot of kids came, and 50 attendees is way more than I've seen at any of the previous meetings. So great job by the Historic Commission. Sorry. Also went to the sort of the library event in Louisville on the same day as Arbor Day was Louisville's Library Appreciation Week, and read to a few kids who were pretty entertaining and what would I say, participatory. I guess that would be the way to put it. But it was really fun. I wanted to mention that the yard waste site is open and compost is also available, and that the Recycling or Resource Conservation Advisory Committee also has a hazardous waste event day, and I'm going to look at my notes say May 15th. Is that correct? Look on the website.
I was going to ask you.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's May 15th. So, but look on the website. You should keep an eye open because that there will be. It's a hazardous waste collection site day. Let's see. I wanted to also mention that the last of the workshops related to the Climate Smart Loan Program are this Wednesday, the 28th, and you need to sign up with Boulder County. You need to sort of do an RSVP. So I'll send another note around on the CAC list, but otherwise, I think the town website may also have that link. It's really an important program, and it gives it. Even if you decide you don't want to go through the loan program for improvements in your home, if you go to the workshop, you learn an awful lot about what your home, what are sort of the priority items to do in your home, should you decide to do it on your own. So I think it's a very, very valuable workshop. For my fellow board members, I'll mention that Dr. Cog is having a training on aging. Even though Dr. Cog is not our agency for aging, it might be worth going and learning about what some of the programs are and some of the problems are, and that's on May 12th. I think, let's see, town meetings. Oh, and for the Colorado Municipal League, I've gotten a few emails from that related to support for various bills and things, and I've forwarded those to the town manager, who's helped provide support where appropriate. That's it.
Thanks. Trustee Sterling?
I really have nothing to report. I did hope that before we met with Louisville, that we could possibly have an interchange committee meeting before that, but I don't know. I mean, that may never happen. But just because in a meeting as a whole, I'm not sure it's the best environment to broach the divergence of opinions regarding the interchange. However,
Dragging?
Well, no, they're pretty clear they don't like the Northeast Loop, or have been pretty clear. But we did have a proposed alternative that we were hoping they'd look at. And but again, I like the idea of meeting with them and having the joint meeting, so I don't want that to fall into Neverland either. So.
Okay. I think that makes sense. I don't know. I think that I've heard some positive comments recently via the town manager that they want to look at this some more. So hopefully they'll be able to pull something together. So, okay, thanks. Trustee Hanson.
Well, since being elected and sworn in, I've seen a lot of friends in the community and met a lot of new people. They've all congratulated me, and they're very appreciative of the board. And I've told them all how energized I am and ready to tackle the challenges ahead. And every single one of them has said, well, we'll ask you again in 3 months. And so my concern and question to the rest of the board is the honeymoon now over and it's all downhill from here?
It has its ups and downs.
I've been going around to in the town hall and introducing myself to staff members, putting names with faces. I asked Matt if he could put together a sheet that lists everybody's name with their title and a picture. He said he'd look into it, and Scott came to me today and said it was already in the works, so there's going to be a sheet that has names with faces and all that, so that's going to be very helpful. I also went to Molly Brown in the Arbor Day presentation. I went to a ProStack meeting with Sandy, and the only thing that I would add is that Jim Payne has a really good group of people there, and they're very energetic, very enthusiastic, and they want to do what's best for this community. So I look forward to doing a lot of work with them. I had another resident come to me today and asked if it was possible that we could step up sheriff patrols after the community garage sale. He had said that he recalls an increase in residential break-ins in the first couple of weeks after the event. So I'm not sure what if we have data on that, or what the procedure is to talk to Sheriff Cullen, or what we do, but I told him that I would mention that tonight. Last board meeting, Ms. Forshee had a question about traffic and the Superior Morville Classic race. We had received some information from the town manager that I think is addressed to everybody, and this came from Scott, it didn't come from me. But it says that the traffic plan for the Superior Morville Classic includes a public outreach component for the residents of original town. The course for the Sunday, May 30th race includes 76th Street, Coal Creek Drive, and in original town. And the outreach items include a flyer will be delivered 4 weeks and again 1 week before the event date with general information, a map indicating how local traffic will be impacted, an invitation to watch the event at Astley Park with food and refreshments, and contact information for residents with questions. Access to 76th Street and Coal Creek Drive will be limited during the all-day race, and marshals will be present throughout the day to monitor traffic. There will be delays for residents who wish to cross either street, but delays will be short. Parking on 76th Street and Coal Creek Drive will be prohibited on race day. No parking signs will be posted along both streets at least 7 days prior to the race. And then staff will get in contact with anybody who has left their car parked on the street. Heather Craycraft at the Superior Chamber also updated me today, just saying that the traffic plan is coming together, and that you'll be able to cross Coal Creek Drive on 2nd and 4th Avenues. And then the last thing I have is the Courage is Change event is this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the Renaissance. That's at the Renaissance at Flatirons, and it includes a silent auction, live music, and belly dancing.
So I had some feedback for you since you asked that. I don't know if the honeymoon is over, but you have to remember this is not a sprint, it's a marathon run. So you got to pace yourself. You'll be fine.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Randall?
2 items. In preparation for the board strategic planning session next Monday, you've got workbooks in front of you, not just the review of the 2010 items, as well as any new items that will be brought to the table by any of the board members, but I've provided for a historical perspective reports from 2009, 2008. So if nothing else, it'll put you to sleep on some night that you're suffering from insomnia. The other very good news, we shared with you a couple weeks ago, sales tax receipts for the month of January blew all of our socks off. The numbers continue to be very, very good for February. Receipts were up 8.6%. For the year, we're up 10.5% from a year ago. So on the backs of the fact that we were one of the best performing cities in the state last year, I don't know of anybody that's experiencing double-digit increases this year. Our retailers are doing very, very well. Parallel track, while it doesn't provide a large revenue stream, it has always been a good barometer of economic activity, and that's building permits. And likewise, building permits for the year for the first 3 months through March are up 12.4%. So I'm not saying we're out of it, but the trends are starting to show in the black instead of the red.
And would you mind going through we didn't get a chance to go through the weekly digest. Did you have anything?
Those were the items.
That's from the weekly digest. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Carberry?
I don't have anything.
Ms. Harden?
I don't have anything.
Okay. That brings us to item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. And on the consent agenda is the meetings minutes, so everything else has been pulled.
Gladys Forshee, 404 South 3rd Avenue. Excuse my voice. I have 5 different things. One thing, it's springtime in Original Town. The creek's running. I just want all of you board people to drive down and look at Second Creek and imagine what it is like when it's 2 foot higher than what it is right now. Because it's going to be problems. And so that doesn't happen every day. So it's something that we in Original Town keep a pretty close eye on this time of year. So it's my understanding then that the Historic Society, or Historic Commission is taking control of the fire cart?
They're making recommendations. I mean, they don't control it, but
You mean the fire cart, not the fire truck?
Correct. I said the fire cart. So they're taking control of the fire cart?
they're making recommendations about what to do, yes.
Well, I'm very sorry about that. And I got my 2 cents worth into the commissioner about that, historic commissioner about that, and I'm sure we'll discuss it further. I also wanted to know on the bike race, are we going to be bombarded with bicycles in Original Town then, other than Cold Creek Drive and that part of town?
All we have control over is the race course, so I don't know what else, if people happen to bike through there, I have no idea, but.
Well, I think there needs to be signs put up then, that 2nd Avenue on down to the south end of town, William Street isn't bombarded with bicycles. Let them stay up there. But, 3 days is an excessive amount of time to ask residents to tolerate hundreds of bicycles in their front yards, backyards, alleys. And I think there needs to be signs put up that they stay out of Original Town.
Okay. I mean, it's a public street, so we can't
I
tell people what to do.
understand it's a
but-
public street. I pay taxes for that public street. And I don't want hundreds of bicycles running up and down my street and in my alley for 3 days.
Okay.
So I don't know why signs can't be put up to stay out of Original Town. I also want to know about the toilet that's been moved from Children's Park out to the curb on 3rd Avenue. 3 weeks ago, it was moved from Children's Park out to the curb. You folks in Rock Creek will not tolerate it for 1 day. Now, when is it going to be moved?
The board is not going to know the answer to these questions, and if you have questions, it's probably best to address it with the Parks and Rec Director.
Well, gosh, it's been discussed before that the board was going to get answers just right away for residents when they had questions.
Okay.
So when can I get an answer? Why should I have to call Parks and Recs when I'm here now asking about it?
Nobody here knows the answer to that question. Once again, it's very helpful if you have questions to let somebody know before the meeting as opposed to trying to answer this in the middle of a public meeting. If you want, you can give me a call later on. I can call Parks and Rec Director, but unless somebody else here happens to know the answer, I don't think we can do that right now.
So when will you give me an answer?
Why don't you give, once again, if you don't want to call the Parks and Rec Director, either give me a call or whatever you like.
Has anything been done about equipping the town hall to make it handicapped accessible?
The answer is that we've talked about it briefly and haven't. There's no plan. So I think that you're specifically regarding the automatic door entry into town hall. I think that actually makes sense for handicapped individuals. We haven't made a decision. Actually, the board hasn't even discussed it yet. So.
Okay, then perhaps my complaint to the Department of Justice will speed that process up.
Okay.
This top one is the original. The rest of them are copies.
Okay.
It seems as though that there's a few problems about following laws in this town, and I filed several open records form a few weeks ago. Some of us residents combined together, but there was a couple of them that was one in pertaining to my own situation regarding the election. I didn't get an answer to that open record form when I met with Phyllis to get the responses. So I'm submitting the second request It is not nice. And I don't intend for it to be nice, because my rights have been violated, and I am entitled to an answer. And so, Mr. Mayor, since you seem to have a great deal of problem following laws in this town, we've had this scenario before, and other residents and I have taken action to make sure that our rights are protected, that I certainly hope that you will see that this open record form is complied with. If not, then I think that you need to resign as mayor. And the open records form has a state statute on there that the town board can remove you as mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Additional public comments?
Good evening, Steve Smith, 653 Eaton Circle. I'm here on HOA business this evening. The first item I wanted to bring up to you is we have in our contract a person with an ATV to help us get to and from the parking lots for our events. And I was curious if the board would approve somebody on our board, I own an ATV, to be able to do that, to load all the coolers and everything we do for the movie nights. And I would be happy to take instruction for Parks and Rec. But if you consider that, it would do two things. One, you wouldn't have to pay somebody to show up to the events because my job's not paid. And two, it would be a lot more convenient for the HOA to be able to go to and from it. I just need a set of criteria and some rules to follow to make sure that I'm complying with what Parks and Rec wants and make sure that I'm not four-wheel driving in the ball fields and those kind of things. So if you would consider that, please. That's the first item. The second item I have this evening is there have been some requests from people, residents, asking me to keep the HOA and the people in the HOA informed about different things. One of these is the new Clearwire, which was a surprise to me. I had no idea this was going on. So they've asked me to use the HOA email to send that out and make it clear what it is. I have a problem with doing that because I'm biased in certain items. So what I prefer is something from the board given to us to be put in our newsletters and our emails. And that way it's clearly communicated without any angles to it. So if you would consider that as well. And I think that's it this evening.
So let's see, maybe you could get together with, unless Director Dominguez is here waggling a finger, so you could either get together with her, or if there's something, a board action that we need to do, then I'm sure that we'd be more than open to that. So regarding the ATV. And that, in terms of the communication, the town always, we do whatever we can, and if you have additional access to additional emails, that, we could certainly send out all the information that we have, and that, people can link to the town packet on the town website. So I'm sure that, if you wanted to chat with the town manager.
I'd appreciate it. Then I know the communication's going out in a light that is purely communication.
Yep.
Okay. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items?
George Custer, 109 South 4th. I'd like more information about our cleanup, what it entails, what can be picked up, can trees be picked up, can what does it entail on our cleanup? The 13th of, it's supposed to be the 13th of May is when this is? Curbside pickup?
Yep. So I don't know if Trustee Schumann, do you have details, or Director Dominguez? Or
It's a cleanup, so does that include everything?
It specifically precludes household hazardous wastes, so you can't dispose of things like empty paint cans and aerosol cans and insecticides and the like. You cannot dispose of commercial construction waste. We don't want to see contractors coming and dropping a bunch of stuff at the curb. But if it emanates from the residential property adjacent, it'll get picked up at the curb.
Does that include trees?
Yes.
There's certain waste and
Yes,
recyclable.
I believe there are standards
Wash machines and so forth, sir?
There are appliances will be accepted. Trees and limbs and brush. I believe there were standards for both weight and for length, whether it's 4-foot length, I don't recall, but, bundled.
I'm just double checking to make sure that people, if they want to get rid of them, they can put them out there and do it. That's all I'm saying. because I'm going to do it. Next, I got on the minutes of March the 8th, I'm going to, there's not enough information on page 6, 11, and 12. Phyllis is just putting in there that certain people spoke. We need more information up to date on what's spoken of in the minutes. We're eliminating some things that are discussed, period, and I think it should be brought up so people know what's going on.
Mayor, might I say something?
Trustee Bennington?
I was going to actually bring this up in the reports and issues. I had the same, I hope I agree, I'm addressing the same issue, George. When, right now we say public comment, George Kuffner, Gladys Forshee, in public comment on an issue, when there's a public hearing or whatnot, or that type of public comment, and we're just saying public comment and list their names. We're not saying the nature of the assent or the dissent, so it's not part of the permanent record. And I, too, would like to see the nature of the assent or dissent recorded. Is that what you're talking about?
After more information, what the party or individuals spoke about.
Right.
If we don't mind.
So just to move on, we can do whatever the board wants to do. We would need to hire probably a transcription service if that's, if we're going to start transcribing meetings, because the minutes are hopefully minutes and not transcription. So Phyllis, God bless you. You do a great job with minutes. She doesn't have the ability to transcribe an entire meeting. So that's, we'd have to hire somebody to do that.
Can I offer a solution?
Yep.
Simply, I believe saying, because I use the old minutes as a historical document as well, simply saying that XYZ resident spoke against the tall tower, the height of the tower at the Rocky Mountain, just registered dissent or registered, was in agreement with. I agree. We can't
so
do
that's
too much.
slightly different, I think, from what George is saying, though. I think that you wanted additional, well, I'll let George decide what you want, because I think, George, you wanted a summary of what the people said, right?
Yeah, what they're saying, and if we have more questions, we can go to Phyllis and get more information, but just not putting their names in there saying, so-and-so spoke. I'm speaking about 3 different things, and I should be, it should be itemized what I'm speaking about.
Right.
Now, I have one more item, sir.
Sure.
And this is pertaining to the trail that goes through our residential area that's been there for the last 5 years. When are we going to do something about this trail? Gladys is right. Come bike day, there'll be bikes all over. There's bikes all over now. There's people running all over. This is a residential area down on 2nd Avenue on down. The whole end of that town is residential. We were going to purchase a piece of property, and I've never heard any more about it, to make a trail from this east end of town to that railroad track to hook up to Rock Creek. They got money every other place to do things. Why can't we get something done?
And I think
Let's help these people that live in a residential area.
So just so I'm clear, so
Please.
I think you're speaking of the trailhead to the Marshall Mesa Colton trailhead that's on, help me here, it's on.
Well, you know what I'm
3rd,
talking about, Joe.
And I think the other parcel you're talking about purchasing is the Shin Shin property, if I remember the name correctly, which is off of McCaslin, and potentially putting a trailhead there. I think that would be reasonable. We've had discussions with, is it Miss Shin Shin? I don't know, or is it Miss Shin? My apologies, but I don't think that we've come to any agreement with her. So.
Well, Mayor, we spent over $1 million on 13 acres up here that we can't use except to look at as wetlands, okay? This would have been a lot more important to the people that live here than 13 acres.
You're preaching to the choir here, George.
No, you know what I'm talking about. I've
You.
been on this program for years, and you've been sitting behind her for years, and I would like something done about it. all of you look into it. Not just you, but you know what I'm talking about mainly.
I totally understand what you're coming from, and I totally agree with your comments. You have to have a willing seller.
Well, will you please look into it, or have the town manager look into this and see what answers you can come up about the purchase? Because I heard that no one talked to the woman that owns the property. Now, that's what I heard.
Okay.
Hearsay.
That might be, yes, hearsay.
I didn't hear it directly, but I can go find out directly, just like you can.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 6, which is the consent agenda. And remaining on the consent agenda is the approval of the board minutes for the March 8, 2010 meeting, the special meeting of April 12, 2010, and a regular meeting of April 12, 2010, and acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission meeting. Motion by Trustee Spilmatz, second by Trustee Williams. All in favor? Trustee Gregorez?
Except for the March 8th.
Yes.
I was not here on March 8th.
Okay. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to what was the item number C, which is the adoption of a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County for the Colton Trailhead. And Trustee Pennington, this is for you.
Need to abstain from March 8th. Actually, Chris, too.
If there's any changes.
Yeah, you're going to need to abstain from March 8th because you were not here.
Okay, I will note
You'll
that.
know that, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to raise this issue. I was not on the board at the time the trailhead discussions were had. I was a participant, however, in the public hearings on these issues, and I wanted to revisit a couple of concerns from that time. I apologize in advance if this is not the nature of what should occur in looking at this particular agenda item, but I do think they have merit, and I would like to actually have them noted. Now, as I understood, part of the roundabout reasoning, the development of the roundabout was that the trailhead would be a regional draw. I understood that the town actually had big plans for the trailhead and expected it to be a substantial part of the town, a showpiece for Superior, if you will. So in looking at the blueprint that we were provided, I was a little stunned, actually, to see that we only have 30 regular parking places in the plan as put forth right now, plus 2 handicapped spaces. I am a frequent user of trails throughout the community, and particularly the Mesa Trail in El Dorado Canyon. And I have it on good authority that they have roughly 50 parking spaces there, and across the street at Dowdy Draw they have 37, and there's substantial street parking. It's being ticketed regularly, but there is substantial street parking. My concern about the 30 parking spaces at our own trailhead, at Colton Trailhead, is there is absolutely no ability for street parking any longer on McCaslin and on Colton because of the roundabout. Any street parking would be extremely dangerous, and that would go to another point I want to make, that I'm assuming we are going to have no parking signs put up, and then actual enforcement of that no parking, because you're going to have people whipping through the trailhead, the roundabout in all directions. So the geography doesn't support street parking. But Mesa has 50, Dowdy Draw has 37. South on 93, there are, if you go south to the trailhead on 93, there are 30 very spacious parking spaces. And Marshall Mesa, there are a total of 55 parking spaces. So I just throw that out in terms of adequacy. If we are making a regional draw, I think we should seriously consider making sure we have ample parking at that regional draw to begin with. I would like to then ask the question, how are we going to monitor usage, and what is Plan B in terms of satellite parking or additional parking should that be required?
Mr. Randall, I don't know if you have any comments from Boulder County, but
None. I wasn't sure if there was a question, but 35 parking spaces, including horse trailers. There's currently one trail that emanates from this location. It is anticipated long-term that there will be 3 trails traversing this particular trailhead. The one that we've just heard reference to, north-south, running parallel to McCaslin. The existing trail that runs immediately west, moving west from McCaslin. And ultimately, the long-term plan also calls for an additional trail going south and ultimately going through the Rocky Flats property. So in terms of capacity demand, it is a product of the number of trails and the quality of those trails. So whether this is comparable to, better than, or lesser than Marshall Mesa, Dowdy, or any of the other Boulder County trails, it's significantly more than whatever has traditionally existed there when it was nothing but a dirt path. It's obviously significant than what exists there today, the 8 temporary spaces that have been created in anticipation of this. And if the town has some desire that it wants to do something more, I'm sure Boulder County wouldn't be opposed to it, as long as you're prepared to pay for it.
additional trustees' comments?
So my recollection of the way in which we're preparing the parking lot is that it's not paved, it's rather gravel and sort of more, and pounded, or whatever the
It's
right word
recycled
is.
asphalt.
Yeah.
It will have the appearance of being paved, though it won't look like your recent street resurfacing.
And so my take on that was, and that was partly with drainage in mind and other things, I thought, but at least that's why I brought it, yes. But does that make it more flexible in terms of, and lower cost to add if we find we're having a lot of overflow?
If we were to find that we were having a lot of overflow, it more has to do with the amount of land that you want to have consumed by those adjacent amenities. All of this improvement is being done on county property. We own the property on the south side of the dividing line, south of the trail. So I'm sure that's part of the equation from the county's part. But I would also expect that it has to do with the bottom line. And one of the reasons this has been so slow in coming to you, they've been looking for a much larger financial contribution from the town. We stuck to what we had within the budget, which was the $100,000. You'll also notice we've limited our exposure in terms of ongoing maintenance and future repair and replacement costs with that in mind. But again, if there's a change in direction and that the board wants to accomplish something else, we'll take it. But this is consistent with what your advisory groups, both ProStack and OSAC, have looked at, seen numerous times, what the board has seen. So tell us what you want, we'll get you there.
Trustee Pennington?
What were the projected use estimations at the time? I mean, we put $500,000 into a roundabout that led to what we called was a regional draw on a trailhead. What were our projected use numbers?
I don't know that there has been a traffic analysis or a user analysis of that trailhead. As I said, right now there's one trail. Ultimately, there is hopes that there will be 3 trails emanating from and through this particular trailhead. But I've never seen any empirical data that's done any kind of a study, nor do I, one, recall any discussion about quote-unquote regional, nor do I necessarily, other than the convenience of cooperative construction, there was never any linkage between the roundabout and the trailhead. The fact that Boulder County was going to construct a roundabout and create a 4th leg of what had traditionally been a 3-legged intersection, the town's response to that was, here's how we want to manage our intersection. The design that the board ultimately chose had nothing to do with what was happening on the west side. Yeah, Joe?
Well, a couple of things. I don't necessarily think the idea that a roundabout was designed to be a draw. I mean, that was designed for us to manage traffic in a way that we thought was best for the town. But I think with respect to the question of usage and monitoring, it's speculation whether 30 will or will not be enough, and I guess it'll be rather obvious to us if it isn't enough, and then we'll have to figure out a retrofit or add parking, and that probably would be at our expense unless the county can be convinced that they built an inadequate trailhead. But I guess the idea that this wasn't enough never really came up as a consideration when we went through our processes. So you might be right, but I wouldn't back off from what we're doing now to try to redesign this at this point, because my familiarity with the trail is that I've never seen more than, even when there was informal parking allowed there, never saw more than 6 or 7 cars there ever at one time. So.
Trustee Clements?
And I'm going to guess, since Boulder County's been such a positive partner with us on these in the past, they want to make a success of this as well. And if we have a lot of people, I'm guessing they want to make sure that we accommodate a lot of people safely. That'd be my guess.
Trustee Williams?
And I recall on OSAC, Open Space Advisory Committee, that we discussed at length many times about the parking lot and the number of parking spaces, and we asked if the other Boulder County ones, what their average number of parking spaces on some of their other trailheads, the more developed trailheads. And as I'm recalling, I think they're pretty close. But I'm actually going to ask Juanita, now that she's come up, if you can clarify that. Because I recall way back when discussing it.
Director Dominguez.
Juanita Dominguez, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Boulder County has several different trailheads in the area. However, none of the trailheads around 93 and 128 are Boulder County trailheads. Those are the City of Boulder trailheads. So those are a little bit different. But this does fit the model of Boulder County trailheads, the types of spaces, the amount of spaces. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned is that while we were going through the design process, both Boulder County and the town staff looked at the dimension and the way that the trailhead is set up on their property. And if there were any future designs or interest in expanding, it could potentially expand to the north. However, again, that is Boulder County property.
Thank you.
Trustee Pennington?
Juanita, could you tell us, is there or has there been under discussion the contingency scenario, that if it is very popular, once all the trails are in place, because we're building for the future here, once all the trails are in place, if parking becomes a problem, because I have to reiterate, there is no possibility of street parking as there is at many other sites. So we don't have that natural expandability. So was there any discussion of needing satellite or another lot or some expansion? And what's your understanding of who would absorb that cost and what the process would be?
Again, in the design process, there was a considerable amount of discussion about the fact that the trailhead could be expanded to the north.
But could be at whose expense? Could be
We didn't get into
with what process?
There was only, the discussion was only to look at a way to possibly expand if there was a need in the future, but that was as far as discussions.
Okay.
And that was in conjunction with Boulder County, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Additional discussion about this particular issue? Public comment about this issue?
George Cuthbert, 109 South 4th. I don't know why there's a discussion about property and parking spaces. That was a public road, 60 foot wide, from there all over to 128 before you ever got here. The county took it in under their wing after they bought the open space there, which they own several hundred acres of open space up there. Superior bought a little piece of property up there from the Harneys and the other party, about 20 acres worth. So where does the 60-foot right-of-way come from? That was a road that was traveled by cars occasionally. I'm one of them. You could go from there over to 128 if you want a scenic route of the mountains. You don't have that anymore. You have people running up and down there, and you say you can't get enough parking for horse trailers? Horse trailers are 20, 25 feet. You don't go up there with just a little single horse trailer. They're going to go ride, and they're going to go with a double horse trailer or a 4-horse trailer. It needs more parking area. It should have been brought up, and I can't see the town paying $100,000 when we were told we were going to not put any money into that roundabout. We put $15,000 in our light, and now all of a sudden we come up with $100,000 to share with the county on an intergovernmental agreement. If we can't run this town, then we don't need intergovernmental agreements with everybody around. That $100,000 is a lot of money. Sure, they give you $450,000 for a roundabout, but there's a lot of people who didn't want a roundabout. It was an expense to that road when we took it over. It was on account of an attorney misjudged a pond over here, and we ended up with a road, $700,000 worth of payment. And that Colton Road was part of that trailhead right there. That was an open road, 60 feet. So why can't we get some property back for parking? Hey, we ought to look into this a little clearer than that.
Additional public comment?
Good evening. Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle. I serve on ProStack. And just on the parking, Trustee Pennington has raises a good question, but when both boards, advisory committees, OSAC and ProStack, looked at it, originally there was that, as Director Dominguez has pointed out, there actually was on the plan a phase 2 for parking in the event that, now I understand there would be costs, but it wasn't, if I recall, a relatively high cost extension to just extend it. But for a frame of reference, the Boulder City lot, trailhead and parking lot on the west side on 93, which is at the other end of this loop we're now creating, has, if you know that trailhead, you go in, there's a circle. There are about 30 spaces in that circle, and anyone who uses that trailhead will know that those are often, particularly on weekends, full. Then there's another 30 spots in a rectangular lot to the left, over toward the Marshall Road exit. So that's they have that for overflow. And then there's a horse trailer area there too where you can go in. So I would anticipate that we would have comparable parking requirements on our side to what the city has on their side eventually when the second trail is completed, hopefully at the end of this year. But there should be a provision for a second phase if it becomes necessary, and that was in the original thinking that both OSAC, if I may say, and ProStack looked at.
Okay, thank you. Additional public comments? Seeing none, desires of the board of how to proceed with this?
Actually, I have a couple more questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
No.
Trustee
Okay.
Williams.
I just kind of wanted to know what kind of plan we have for the winter snow removal. I see that it says no snow removal is planned, but do we have any thoughts on that?
Juanita?
If there is no plan for winter snow removal, due to the fact that Boulder County does not wish to have individuals on their trails in the middle of winter, if the conditions are such that the conditions are poor for snow accumulations, they don't necessarily want people to get stuck on the trails out in the middle of wilderness. So.
On the entering off trail, yes.
Right.
Because they can't find it.
Or getting stuck in the mud.
So they don't plow any of their
No, they do
trailheads? None? And then one other question you might want us to take. How much is the routine maintenance, excluding the minor repairs classification that are less than 2,000 that the town is responsible for? What do you kind of estimate that would be the routine maintenance that and the cost of that?
The last estimate I looked at for my department was approximately $10,000 to $12,000 annually.
And what does that entail, roughly?
It entails the reuse water to water the plants, occasional mowing, trash pickup, restroom cleanup, those kind of things.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Additional board questions? Direction from the board? Trustee Pennington?
I would like to ask, actually, again, enlist Juanita's help on this. Is there time, I'm not clear on the time sensitivity of this agreement. Is there time within the context of this agreement to have a discussion with Boulder County about our concerns about the adequacy of the number of parking spaces, reinforcing again that there is no possibility of street parking here for overflow, and to get a cost estimate of right now, if I can add, if this is going to be something that we are proud of, I would like it to be well done at the get-go. It's also more cost efficient that way, rather than creating satellite parking in a year or two. If our time frame allows it, to go back to Boulder County and say there is interest in perhaps expanding this to 50 spaces at the outset, to get a new cost structure to see what amount Boulder County would be able to absorb and what they might require from us, and to have that discussed at a future meeting.
Mr. Randall?
You take the first shot. I'm going to say you won't see construction in 2010.
This project has been in the works for at least 3 years, and the intent was to have the public process, which was already had, and talk about the number of spaces at that time, and those were the discussions that were had at the time. But if I went back to Boulder County, I would think that we would be going back to the drawing board and having to restart the process, and it wouldn't be 2010, I can tell you that, and it would most likely be pushed off. And I know that Boulder County has been working to get this project moving forward with staff, with town staff. Their budget is also deteriorating each year, and it has been a very difficult situation with Boulder County and some of the projects. And this particular project, I would say if we waited another year, may potentially go away entirely. So,
Trustee Gregorius?
Yeah, I would be in favor of making a motion to approve this resolution.
Okay. So, motion by Trustee Gregorius, second by Trustee Skumatz. Additional discussion regarding this issue? Seeing none. Phyllis?
Muckle?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Gregorius?
Yes.
Cirelli?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Skumatz?
Yes.
Pennington?
No.
Okay, so that motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to item number D, which is adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with Cocal Landscape for annual color program. Trustee Williams?
Yeah, I every year I pull this because I just feel that it's quite exorbitant to be spending almost $100,000 for annuals every year. And I asked before looking at perennials and seeing how we could incorporate that and make our costs in subsequent years less. And I would like to look at that. Obviously, it's not going to work for this year, but if we could look at this and see how we could develop such a thing and how that would actually be for future costs. Would it really actually help, or would it not? I'd like to see some kind of analysis.
Director Dominguez, do you have any thoughts about that?
First of all, again, Juanita Dominguez, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Back in 2007, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space had a significant project that had to do with renovating a lot of the beds, a lot of the shrub beds, annual beds, and those kind of things. And that was accomplished in 2007. However, we've increased some of the new beds, the annual beds, here along Coal Creek and also along Marshall and McCaslin. So the net difference isn't really much as far as what has changed from perennial beds, shrub beds to annuals. If I could just give you an idea of the square footage of shrub beds and perennial beds and annual beds, we have about 1.3 million square foot of bed space, and about 1% is annuals. Now, we could potentially decrease that as well during the budget process, but just kind of wanted to throw that out to you.
Okay.
So based on that 1%, that's about 100,000, right?
19,000.
$100,000.
$100,000.
Yeah.
110,000 budgeted.
Okay. So what would that look like if they were perennials? That's kind of all I'm looking at, is how could we transfer that to perennials in these beds and still make it look attractive, but be half the cost in subsequent years. Obviously, it might cost $100,000 the first year, but in subsequent years, it would not, because we wouldn't be planting every year.
That's not something that I have the information for tonight.
Okay.
It would take a lot of staff time and effort
Right, and I figured
to put
that.
together.
And that's why I'm saying it's not going to happen this time, obviously. But if we could look at that and see, is it potentially an idea to go down? Is that something
Mr. Randall, I
doable?
see you raising your hand.
It would be helpful if we knew what the motivation was, as Juanita tried to explain.
Motivation is money. Save money. It's to save money.
Okay,
That's it.
then that's a perfect discussion to have during budget. Our greenscape consists of turf, shrubs, trees, perennials, annuals. We can look at that 1.3 million square feet and come up with the cheapest installation, if that's what's going to drive the discussion. Life cycle installation. We could turf it all. We could bark it all. We could zero-scape. We could let it grow natural.
And I'm not asking to detract, to make it look less attractive. I mean, that's definitely not my goal here. And my goal is to find a way to make it just as attractive, but half the cost. And if we could look at such a mapping of that to occur. And
I would also have you look at pages 7 and 8 of the contract and recognize that there are 73 different locations throughout town that
I
receive
saw that.
these kinds of treatments.
And I didn't have a map for it, so that also made it a little difficult to figure out in my mind where that all is.
Tab 4 of your supplemental budget book, but we
What I
could
would-
provide it for you again.
If I could, just to maybe move this discussion forward, I might recommend that our Parks, Recreation, Open Space, Trails Advisory Committee look at this. It's one of the things that they talk about as parks issues, and see if they have a recommendation about moving perennials or putting turf in, xeriscaping, whatever the recommendation would be. But I don't think we'd be able to do that this year, as you guys mentioned.
Right.
Trustee Pennington.
Just for the trifecta tonight on process, I think that is what's troubling some of us on this. It's April 26th and planting begins May 10th. I sat in the audience a year ago when the same discussion was had by the same board, and there was a frustration then. as well. I really don't think we have an option in terms of this year's annual plantings, but what I'd like to do is see the process changed for next year to where we can, in order to save staff time, ask our provider, CoCal, to possibly give us some alternatives well in advance, perhaps February timeframe, so the board can have some choices. We can analyze the impact of those choices, perhaps try a few test plots and test locations of xeriscape or perennials or some combination of all of the above. But it's a process question. Can we change the process for the following, next year, so that the board gets a few more options to consider early enough so we can really have a decision to make?
In defense of the process, this was discussed during the months of August, September, and October as the budget was being developed. And the one overriding concern, not unanimously, but the one overriding concern we heard from the board, we know we cut back by 50% in 2009 because of the financial cutbacks that the town and the contingency budget that was put into place. And we want to go back to where we were. Again, that wasn't the unanimous choice of the board, but it was the direction of the board, and it's what we've done. So I would disagree with, I understand the voice, the concern that was raised a year ago tonight when this contract last came before the board, but it was the will of the full board during the budget review process that they wanted to see the historical, traditional way of dealing with our landscaped spaces.
So can I address a question to
Trustee
Scott? So if we were to give this a fuller discussion, would that occur then in August at the budget time?
Yes.
Okay.
And if the guidance is cut your landscaping budget in half, we'll come back with a plan and show you what it'll look like. But that's not the guidance that we received. But that's exactly the time when it would or should come up.
I just think that Trustee Pennington's approach makes sense to me. It's a practical and pragmatic way of moving forward. So I think that I'd be in favor of what you suggested. There's a time and a place. I think for tonight, we need to, the time is going by, we need to, move forward. But I think that's something that we need to be addressed at some point over the next several months. Or else we'll be here in 2011 having the exact same discussions we had last year, we're having now this year.
So, once again, I guess I'd recommend, if it's okay with the board, to have ProStack look at this for the, upcoming budgeting cycle and make a recommendation about it. That is in their purview. That sounds fair?
That's a good beginning.
All right. I'll entertain any public comment regarding this. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion from the board. Trustee Skomatz?
I'd like to move Town of Superior Resolution Number R-22, Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with CoCal Landscape Services, Inc. for annual flower bed installation.
Motion by Trustee Skomatz. Is there a second? Trustee Gross. Further discussion? Seeing none. Phyllis?
Zerelli?
Yes.
Torres?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Yes.
Williams?
No.
Okay. That motion carries. That brings us to item number, what was E, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with Bear Excavating for joint sealing of the Rock Creek Parkway underpass. Trustee Cirelli.
Yeah, I have a very brief, a concern that I just would like to ask, where is this now, 16? Lost it. 16. Ask Kurt regarding the, if he's here.
Yep.
Regarding the difference in the bids and whether he's satisfied that the proposed contractor understands what he's undertaking, and I'm not going to be surprised that there's a big difference in the two bids, plus a similar difference from our budget amount, which budget doesn't drive it, but it does raise the question of is there an understanding of the requirement? Are you satisfied that they understand the requirement and what they're doing?
I am.
So the Director of Public Works is,
Kurt Cohart, Director of Public Works and Utilities.
maybe you could give us a little summary of what's happening here.
Sure. We have a concrete box culvert underpass, which is basically a three-sided box that lined up 26 of them. They create a tunnel under Rock Creek Parkway. At the joints of these box culverts, the water's leaking through. It appears it's just a function of age, like anything else you see with joints. Joints fail after a while. In going through the history, this project started back in 2004. There was some research and analysis done, and a bid actually was put out for a similar type of work. Those bids also had a spread. I think the bids were $33,000 to $65,000, and again, we were doing the drill the holes, put in like a polyurethane grout. And so that bid looks very similar to the bid we had today. One of the things in here is we did require a 3-year guarantee on the ceiling of any defects. Defects is the observation of any water leaking. So there is a little commitment there, and I think these types of specialized jobs, I've seen these spreads on these types of bids. You have some people that do it regularly, have a comfort level and a knowledge of the product they're working with, and so they come in at what our engineer's estimate would be, and we were around 45 for our estimates. You have bidders come in that want to bid on the job, maybe they have a little bit of uncomfort in bidding the job, and so there's more fluff in there, more padding. That's what my call would be. The bidder we've selected was at the pre-bid, asked a lot of good questions, was very knowledgeable through the process, so we are comfortable with him.
It's actually fairly close to your estimate, then.
It was.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustees Kumats?
So this, as you implied, this project has come up as a problem several times, and my recollection of it was that we've never been that certain exactly where the water's coming from or what the problem is. Is that still the case, or do we think we have a pretty good diagnosis of this and this is actually going to solve it, or is this sort of a 3-year patch and someday it's going to take a whole relook or something?
I think water in general, town-wide, is an interesting topic. In this case, I think the approach we're going to take for this specific location, the sealing will work. It's a technology that we use in manholes to seal manholes where we see infiltration. So it may not solve water in the overall area, but I think it'll solve water for this underpass.
For 3 years or for potentially
longer?
I
think
years?
a long term. I mean, I can't predict.
No, but
I don't predict how water moves, but I think we'll have 3 years to determine if there's defects. In that amount of time, I think water finds new pathways, and we'll have the ability to revisit this. I think we'll seal most of it up this first time around. So I'm confident in the long-term solution we're providing.
You're confident in long-term?
That this is a long-term solution.
Oh, thanks. Okay, good.
Trustee Gregores?
Kurt, I just have a quick comment. So obviously, this budget is for Phase 1.
Yes.
Right? So there's a sentence here that I'm going to read out loud. It says, Phase 2 will focus on rehabilitation of the current architectural treatment in a manner yet to be determined. That always scares me when I read that. Yet to be determined, I see dollar signs.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly? I mean, what are we talking about here for Phase 2?
If you've been underneath there.
I walk there every day, so I've been...
It is a sprayed-on, very coarse type surface.
Right.
We could replace that in kind, or we could make it more decorative. We could turn it into a palette for public art. There are a number of things that could be done to the surface once the surface is structurally sound.
Okay.
That's the decision that we have to make. And that's why there's 2 phases and why there's an $80,000 budget for a project that we had an estimate for Phase 1 of being $45,000. We weren't padding the budget. We knew that we would want to finish it once we knew that the leaks were fixed. The cheapest would be go back with what has been there, which is that very rough-looking, almost stucco-ish kind of a surface, or something else.
There's got to be something more attractive than that, and hopefully long-lasting.
Yeah, I think, my philosophy, I've said this before, the CIP program, I manage it, we carry it through as a town staff, but ultimately it's your community, so I think we kind of felt maybe there's a future discussion about what that architectural treatment should be.
Okay.
Great.
Comfortable with where we're at.
Additional board questions, comments, public comment about this issue? Seeing none, I'll entertain board action. Trustee Sorelli?
Okay, I move that board approve Town of Superior Resolution R-23, Series 2010, resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving a construction contract with Bear Creek Excavating for repairs to Rock Creek Parkway Trail underpass.
Motion by trustee Sorelli, second by trustee Skumatz. Further discussion regarding this issue? Phyllis?
Hanson,
Yes.
Gregorus.
Yes.
Cirelli,
Yes.
Buckle,
Yes.
Pennington,
Yes.
Skumatz,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. That brings us to item number 7, which is a public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving an extension of the final development plan for Ethan Allen. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Randall?
Very briefly, the original final development plan for the Ethan Allen property, which fronts on Marshall Road at, many of you may find, the extension of Fifth Avenue through the Superior Marketplace, was approved almost 3 years ago this evening. Within the last month, we've received a formal request from Ethan Allen asking for the courtesy of an extension of that FDP. You have a copy of the letter. The purpose of their extension is twofold. They feel that there may be some opportunity for them to continue or re-explore the prospect of building the facility that was originally proposed when this plan was approved in 2007. That depends on credit markets, it depends on their entire business expansion plan, but they've expressed some interest that there may be an environment in which they would be interested in building that building. If not, they also think that there's value and merit for them to have an approved building as they're attempting to market the site to others. As the board has been made aware in the past, the property is currently for sale. They bought it for $1.5 million. They currently are marketing it for $1.6 million, trying to recapture some of their cost. They've not had any takers for it. It's been on the market for a little over a year, and it remains on the market today. So I'm not sitting here telling you they're coming. They're just delayed. They may come. They may just flip the property to another developer. The approval is for a very specific building, almost 19,000 square feet, signage, facades, parking, all of that. On the unlikely chance that a prospective purchaser would have the need for that exact building, there would be some value in the entitlement. Most likely, a new purchaser is going to come back with a modification.
Okay. Is there anything from the applicant?
He was invited, in fact, encouraged to be here this evening, and I'm...
Okay. All right. Questions from the board? Trustee Skumatz?
Glad to see there's no 95-foot tower.
There you go. Questions or comments from the public?
I would, from a historical perspective, the last time the board dealt with an issue like this, and you've had a couple. You've had Calmonte, who's come back on a couple of occasions and asked for an extension of their approved plans. You've also had the Superior Professional Building, Ridge 2, as it's also been referred to, the 54,000 square foot two-story office complex up by the water treatment plant. When their original FDP expired after 3 years, they did come in and ask for an extension as well, and the board did grant it, just from a historical or precedential perspective.
Okay, thanks. Anything else from the board? Yes, Trustee Hanson.
If we start to move forward on Town Center, how will this decision either way affect what we do?
I don't think that, my best guess is that this will not impact the level. I mean, anybody can weigh in on this, but it's, it's a substantial building, but in the scheme of things, I think it's so small that I don't think it'll have any impact at all. At least that would be my perspective. I don't know if Mr. Randall has a different idea.
These aren't the kinds of buildings, freestanding buildings with surrounded by surface parking that were envisioned in the town center plan. So I don't see them as being in conflict. And these are the kinds of uses that I think the town has said we want to see over in the marketplace and want to fill up. This is one of, I believe, 3 remaining outlots or out pads that Centro either has owned or is trying to flip for independent owners. So I don't see it as being in conflict with what we're trying to accomplish across the street.
Okay. Additional board questions or comments? Trustee Gregorus?
Oh, no, comments.
Okay. Well, I need to close the public hearing, and if there's any action, then Trustee Gregorus. Okay.
I move to adopt the Town of Superior Resolution number R-24, Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an extension for the Ethan Allen final development plan.
Motion by Trustee Gregorus, second by Trustee Skumatz. It's
18 months.
October
18
26,
months.
2011.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Additional questions? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 8, which is a discussion of a show cause hearing for Rock Creek Pizza Dough liquor license application. Mr. Randall, do you want to?
Give a very brief introduction. We have a representative of the applicant here. The purpose of this particular hearing being convened is to address some inconsistencies that were submitted or found in the original liquor license application. The applicant has responded to the board in writing with what we refer to as a stipulation agreement. It has been drafted by the town's prosecutor. So from the town's, at least from the staff's perspective, it seems to address all the issues or concerns. If the board is satisfied with the stipulation agreement, there is no need to conduct the hearing, and it would be appropriate to approve the stipulation agreement. If the board is not satisfied with the information contained within the stipulation agreement, then we should proceed with hearing.
We would ask, though, that that be continued to another evening to allow the prosecutor to prepare witnesses, because in anticipation of the board's approval of this stipulation, the town's prosecutor, David Thrower, is not here or prepared to present testimony tonight. So we would ask that the matter be continued should the board like to have a show cause hearing.
And I'd like to ask the attorney the details of the stipulation.
The stipulation, and the applicant's attorney is here as well, the stipulation basically discusses the incidents that were found in the applicant's background and why those incidents were not disclosed on the application itself. There's no penalty imposed by the stipulation. It simply acknowledges that these incidents do not affect their good moral character, which is what's required to get a liquor license.
So the action that the liquor licensing authority would be taking tonight is that acknowledging that as part of their application and being comfortable with that, and approving it.
Exactly.
Is there anything from the applicant?
Hi, I'm John Arsenault. I'm representing Rock Creek Pizza Dough Co., and I'm also a resident of Superior at 1995 East Colton Road. The comments I'd like to state are that my client happens to have learned from their issues from the past. The issues both occurred 17 and 20 years ago, respectively, for each party. They've complied with all the terms of their court orders, respectively, and they have also avoided any further legal troubles since the incidents from 17 and 20 years ago. Moreover, both are local members of our community in the town of Superior. Ada specifically is a small business owner with 2 successful small businesses. Rock Creek Pizzeria, or Pizza Dough Co. specifically, is in Superior, as we all know, and so they happen to provide a number of jobs to the community. And getting this liquor license approved is essential to them being able to continue to provide jobs to the local community members.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments or suggestions from the board? Trustee Sorelli?
I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
If this is the right time. I would like to move that the authority approve the stipulation agreement here, which incorporates the terms agreed upon by the town and the licensee.
Thank you. Motion by Trustee Sorelli. Is there a second regarding that? Trustee Williams? Discussion regarding any of this? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 9. Is there anything else to come before the board tonight?
No, sir.
All right. Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.